is set to reimpose sanctions on Iran from tomorrow, creating fears of economic hardship for Iranians and uncertainty for businesses wishing to trade with Tehran. European plane maker ATR delivered 5 aircraft to Iran Air over the weekend to beat the sanctions deadline. Like other Western plane makers, ATR relies on components that come from the U.S. and may not now be able to deliver other jets that had been ordered. Meanwhile, the prospect of new sanctions is prompting anger on the streets of Tehran.
The US is acting from a position of force. None of their actions are based on logic or calculation. We can't count on them. Consumer goods are already up 20 to 25%, and they'll only go higher as sanctions come into effect.
If it continues like this, of course life will be difficult in the future. It would be better to implement reforms and resolve some of these issues. I just hope that the government will think about the people.
And to analyze the impact on these developments for European business, I'm joined now by Bryan Carter in Brussels. Bryan, so how big is this going to be for European companies?
Good morning, Tessa. Well, as you know, a lot of these EU companies have actually decided to pull out from Iran, whether it's the German manufacturer Siemens, the Danish shipping company Maersk, the French car maker PSA, or the French energy giant Total. All of these companies have decided to either scale down or completely pull out of Iran from fear of U.S. sanctions. Basically, they say a lot of these companies have decided to rush to Iran in 2015 following the deal to find new business opportunities, but now they're all saying that they're coming back. Basically, in one of its communique, the French energy giant Total said that they would unwind their operation unless there's a specific waiver given by U.S. authorities, and they give 3 reasons for that. First, the loss of financing in dollars by U.S. banks, the loss of U.S. shareholders, and finally, the loss of access to U.S. markets. And that's basically the same dilemma that all these EU companies are facing at the moment. Sure, they can continue doing business with Iran, but that means that they can say goodbye to doing any business with the U.S. in the future. And as you know, the U.S. is a much bigger market. But they also, in this global economy, the U.S. controls a lot of the transactions that are still made in dollars. So for all these companies that do these international deals, it's very dangerous to continue operating with Iran. And that's why a lot of them have actually decided to pull out.
And so, of course, Bryan, we know that Washington, they're reintroducing these sanctions because they didn't approve Trump didn't approve of the nuclear deal that Obama struck with Tehran. But obviously, we know that the EU does support the nuclear deal. So what can Brussels do to defend its interests, basically?
Well, you know, Brussels is really doing all its best to keep this deal alive. The chief EU diplomat, Federica Mogherini, has been holding a lot of bilateral meetings and phone calls with the other signatories to this deal. But of course, when one of its members, if not the most important member, is out, it makes it quite difficult. She actually said, Federica Mogherini, I quote, that the weight of the U.S. in the global economy and financial system is obviously relevant, and that's why it makes it difficult. Today, 6th of August, the EU will also activate what's called the blocking statute. Basically, it will ban EU companies from complying with U.S. sanctions. But most analysts say that this statute is actually very hard to respect, and it will actually make a lot of legal headaches for these companies, because basically they now have the choice of either not complying with these sanctions and continuing their business dealings with Iran, but then they can face U.S. sanctions, or they can decide to discontinue their activities in Iran, but then they face EU legal challenges here in the EU. So it's a really headache for these companies at the moment.
All right. Thank you for that. Bryan Carter reporting there from Brussels. Thanks. All 20 people on board a World War II era plane were killed when it crashed in the Swiss Alps at 5 p.m. on Saturday, according to the police. 3 Austrians and 17 Swiss were on board the tri-motor Ju-52 aircraft, which was used to operate scenic and charter flights.